This is East Asia Tonight.
Good evening, I'm Ateli Edwards. Tonight's top stories from East Asia. A three-way summit of leaders from Gulf states, China and ASEAN signals a new phase in international cooperation that bolsters economic ties amid deepening U.S. trade tensions. Japan seeks to temper the intensity of U.S. tariffs, offering billions of dollars of financial help for small and medium enterprises as both sides prepare for more trade talks. South Korean presidential candidates gear up for their final TV debate with political reform high on the agenda. But with viewership sliding, are voters becoming indifferent? An expert weighs in. Rescue operations in full swing after a large explosion at a chemical plant in China's Shandong province. Authorities have yet to confirm any casualties.
Basically, am able to drive the car out on my phone.
Electric vehicle maker BYD is betting big on intelligent features as it eyes markets beyond China. But are other countries ready for cutting-edge driving technology? Southeast Asian leaders have met with Chinese Premier Li Qiang and counterparts from the Middle East as they seek to insulate their trade-dependent economies from the impact of steep tariffs from the U.S. Malaysia, which is chair of the ASEAN bloc, described this summit in Kuala Lumpur as a landmark moment in international cooperation. Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim noted that the Gulf Cooperation Council, or GCC, made up of 6 countries in the Middle East, has become a center of financial strength, while China's transformation has extended far beyond its borders, reshaping the global landscape.
ASEAN has long demonstrated that regionalism, anchored in consensus, respect, and openness, benefits people. We have thrived in our long-standing partnership with the GCC and China. Today, we have the opportunity to enhance these ties.
Well, earlier, the bloc met with the GCC, which focused on concrete steps to expand trade, investment and sustainable development. Mr. Anwar also highlighted the importance of ASEAN's ties with the GCC amid global uncertainty.
ASEAN-GCC relationship will certainly be key in enhancing inter-regional collaboration, building resilience and securing sustainable prosperity for all. Now, today's deliberations will be crucial in ensuring that our partnership remains dynamic, responsive, and impactful. We have the means and responsibility to rise as anchors of stability and engines for future growth.
And for more on this, we are joined now by CNA's Afifa Arifin, speaking to us live from Kuala Lumpur. Afifa, tell us a little bit more about this ASEAN-GCC-China summit and what sort of concrete outcome came out of it.
Well, yes, this is the first ever trilateral summit of this sort between ASEAN, the GCC and China, and really wraps up a series of high-level diplomatic meetings here in Kuala Lumpur over the last couple of days. And at this summit, Chinese Premier Li Qiang, Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim and Kuwait's Crown Prince Sabah Al Khalid Al Sabah, described this summit as a historic and significant landmark. And they framed this trilateral meeting as a key milestone for these regions, essentially saying that ASEAN, GCC and China were natural partners with complementary strengths. And while there were no new deals announced, what really emerged was a show of unity and shared ambition. And so the leaders really called for deeper economic integration and to work closer together on emerging sectors like AI, like digital technology, as well as clean energy. Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim, in his opening remarks, described this trilateral summit as a convergence of civilizations and markets. He noted how, the GDP of these three areas combined exceeded or amounted to almost 25 trillion US dollars, with over 2 billion people living across these three areas. He also highlighted ASEAN's growing economic clout, the GCC's strength in finance and AI, as well as China's leadership in technology and poverty eradication. So let's listen in to what he said earlier.
The collective scale offers vast opportunities to synergize our markets, deepen innovation, and promote cross-regional investment. I'm confident that ASEAN, GCC, and China can draw upon our unique attributes and shape a future that is more connected, more resilient, and more prosperous for generations to come.
And so the tone of the summit was really optimistic, with all sides calling for closer collaboration in an increasingly volatile global environment. Now, Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim is set to give a press conference anytime soon to wrap up the summits, and we'll bring you more updates once that happens.
FIFA, all eyes were also on Chinese Premier Li Qiang and, what he could possibly say on the sidelines of the ASEAN summit. Details on that?
Right, so Premier Li Qiang first highlighted that China, ASEAN and the GCC have very deep-rooted ties, from the ancient Silk Road to a now more modern version of it, what he calls, the Belt and Road Initiative. And it really reflects this legacy of trust, trade and collaboration. And in his opening remarks, he called for, again, deeper regional collaboration, describing this ASEAN-GCC triangle as one of the most stable and promising frameworks for economic cooperation. And in his opening remarks, he also outlined three key priorities. The first is to open up regions by promoting freer movement of people, of goods, of technology. And the second is to turn differences in development levels into complementary strengths by leveraging on each other through coordinated policies and industrial collaboration. And the third is to deepen inter-civilizational dialogue. He was supporting Malaysia's call for an Islam-Confucianism dialogue, and also called for them to endorse China's own global civilization initiative. At the same time, Premier Li also called for the swift conclusion of that China-GCC free trade agreement and for the full implementation of that ASEAN-GCC FTA.
Well, thanks so very much for that report. CNA's Afifa Arifin speaking to us live from Kuala Lumpur. Now, earlier, CNA spoke with Dr. Sidomir Nestorovic from the ESSEC Business School Asia Pacific, and he explains how ASEAN, the Gulf Cooperation Council, and China actually complement each other and why their partnership could yield real outcomes despite U.S. pressure.
It is important because I believe that the three sides, they are giving something which is complementary. On one side, we have the GCC wealth, we have the China tech, and on the third side, concerning ASEAN, we still have a very big market, which is close to 700 million people, and it is the most dynamic group of the countries in the world. So I think that the three of them have something to bring on the table.
So if we look at President Trump's tariffs, how have they affected ASEAN's economic integration and efforts to become more self-reliant? Is the tariffs just negative?
Yes, we believe that that Trump will go only after China, but in fact he is going after many countries in the world. So the countries such as Vietnam on one side or Mexico on the other side are also feeling the heat of the tariffs, Europe as well. So there is no, I would say, sanctuary. There is no preserved part of the world. So all the other parts of the world are now investigating dynamically what are the possibilities for them to cooperate.
So how viable or effective could this trilateral partnership between ASEAN, the GCC, and China be against America's protectionist policies?
That would be very difficult because we all recall that President Trump paid a visit to the GCC, and he visited 3 countries, and at least on the paper, there were huge investments from the GCC in the United States. So if all this materializes, it will be difficult for the GCC countries also to invest in the other parts of the world, because they don't have infinite source of wealth. So let's see how the situation with the United States unfolds, and after that, maybe there would be also possibilities for the cooperation with ASEAN and China.
Do you think we can expect to see any concrete outcomes from this new trilateral partnership, or do you see it as more of a symbolic alignment?
I think there could be some, I would say, concrete elements, because the premier of China is coming. And if he is coming to Kuala Lumpur, he doesn't come only for the symbolic meetings. He would like also that China is clearly encompassed with the other parts of the world, ASEAN, but also GCC. We know that China is very active in the GCC, so there is no reason not to expect some concrete elements coming from this trilateral meeting.
Time now for a short break, but coming up next on East Asia tonight, Japan has announced a bundle of measures to shield small to medium-sized businesses from the impact of U.S. tariffs. And sales of used cars with zero mileage in China drawing the attention of authorities amid a price war in the auto market. Good to have your company on East Asia tonight. Roland is right here with me with the very latest from the business world. So, Roland, tell us a bit more about Japan. Apparently, they are preparing for more trade talks this week.
Right, Otelli, those trade talks are approaching, but Tokyo is also trying to calm domestic woes. The Japanese government has announced a package worth more than 15 billion American dollars designed to shield SMEs from the impact of U.S. tariffs. The package includes help with corporate financing and the easing of loan conditions. Remember, Japan is a key U.S. ally, but is still subject to the same 10% base tariffs imposed on most nations, as well as additional ones on cars, steel, and aluminium. Now, Tokyo wants all levies on the country lifted, and to this end, representatives of Japan and the U.S. will be meeting later this week. For more on this, we're joined by CNA's Michio Ishida in Tokyo. Michio, good to have you on the show. As always, tell us, how badly have U.S. tariffs impacted Japan's economy and businesses so far?
Well, Roland, Japan's GDP for January to March showed a 0.2% contraction from the previous quarter, or the first contraction in 4 quarters. And this was before Mr. Trump's tariffs were in place. In annualized terms, GDP for January to March was minus 0.7%. Now, analysts here think GDP for April to June will continue to contract due to slowdown of exports to the U.S. And in a report released by Mitsubishi UFJ Research and Consulting, current tariffs can push down Japan's GDP by 0.6%. Now, Japanese cars, which U.S. slapped 25% additional tariffs, are reporting a grim picture. Auto giant Toyota Motors project 35% fall of its profits, while Honda 70%. And it's also due to a stronger yen against the U.S. dollars. And that means the auto industry, with around 380,000 manufacturers, will be impacted. Mr. Ishiba has been talking to business owners which rely heavily on exporting to the U.S. For instance, Komatsu, known for its industrial heavy equipment, told Mr. Ishiba, with 27% of its sales relying on North America, it forecasts its profit to fall by 30% in the year ending March 2026.
Well, Michio, it sounds like Japan could be in dire straits. What is Japan prepared to bring to the table for this next round of trade talks with the U.S.?
Well, remember, U.S. slapped 10% basic tariffs on Japan imports, and on top of that, 25% on steel, 25% on cars, and car components, which are Japan's top export items. And Mr. Ishiba wants all tariffs to be removed. And during his phone conversation with Mr. Trump on Friday, he reiterated that. Mr. Trump did not provide any specific response. Interestingly, it was Mr. Trump who initiated this call. And they also talked about security in the region, and Mr. Trump is reported to have invited Mr. Ishiba to come see the best fighter jet in the United States. And they should be meeting next month in Canada for the G7 summit. Local media say Mr. Ishiba may actually head to the U.S. after that for a one-on-one meeting with Mr. Trump for tariff talks. Some possible trade-offs. Import more rice from the U.S. as Japan is facing shortage of rice. Mr. Ishiba thinks there's a chance of exploring shipbuilding segment with the U.S. as Mr. Trump announced the golden age of shipbuilding for the U.S. And China is strong in this area, but Tokyo thinks it can contribute to Mr. Trump's ambition, and one of them is offering its icebreaker technology, regarded as one of the best in the world. Now, according to Financial Times and other local media, an idea believed floating between the two countries is a joint sovereign fund for large-scale investment, but no official statement has been released on this. And on a brighter note, Mr. Trump approved a partnership between a Japanese steelmaker, Nippon Steel, and U.S. Steel, reversing his earlier disapproval. Now, the original deal was agreed as an acquisition by Nippon Steel. Mr. Trump said earlier this week, U.S. should be in control. So what does this mean? Well, Mr. Ishiba's special envoy on U.S. trade talks, Minister of Economic Revitalization, Ryosei Akazawa, is expected to hold his fourth meeting in Washington this Friday with trade representatives, but most of all, he wants to talk to Treasury Secretary Bessent.
Michio, appreciate that comprehensive report there. That was CNA's Michio Ishida reporting to us live from Tokyo. Top trade officials from the EU and China are planning to meet again early next month. It's another sign that both sides are stepping up efforts to push back against tariff pressure from U.S. President Donald Trump. Chinese Commerce Minister Wang Wentao will meet with the European Commissioner for Trade and Economic Security on the sidelines of a WTO ministerial meeting in Paris. This is set for early June. The same month, European leaders travel to Beijing for a summit with Chinese counterparts. Investors have been digesting the latest data that showed profits at China's industrial firms increasing at a faster pace in April. A government trade-in program helped drive demand for manufactured goods amid tariff pressure. And this is how the markets closed. On the mainland, the Shanghai Composite closing down for 0.2% roughly. Shenzhen down by more than 0.6%. Only bright spot was the Hang Seng Index up 0.4% for the day. Shares of Chinese food delivery giant Meituan making a comeback towards the close after trading in the red for most of the day. The company recorded better than expected sales in the first quarter after a strong push into markets outside of China. And shares of Chinese tech giant JD.com recouping some of its losses but still in the red for the day. This is after the CEO of Meituan highlighting intensifying competition in China's instant retail market. Chinese EV makers extending their losses as the industry faces a double whammy of a price war and a meeting this afternoon between China's Commerce Ministry and automakers over the rise of second-hand sales of unused cars. A report says the meeting follows comments by Great Wall Motors chairman, that's Wei Tianqin, who said that thousands of so-called second-hand cars with zero mileage have appeared on Chinese used car platforms. Now, it's a way for automakers and dealers to meet aggressive sales target, the result of years of stiff competition in the industry. Hong Kong listed shares of BYD and Geely ending the day in the red, as well as the Hang Seng Automobile Index following the report of today's meeting. BYD shares have lost more than a tenth this week after a major sell-off yesterday when the EV giant announced price cuts as high as 34% on electric and hybrid models. Now, analysts say it is a move by the automaker to protect its market share following its slowest year-on-year growth last month. Global electric manufacturers competing to outsmart one another by focusing on the most advanced driving features that they can offer. One such system that BYD is offering is its intelligence driving technology, known as God's Eye. The company told CNA's Olivia Seong that it plans to make this technology available overseas soon.
I'm Olivia Seong, and I'm here at BYD's HQ in Shenzhen, where they are keen to show us their latest intelligent driving technology as the race to go smart with electric vehicles heats up. The world's largest electric vehicle maker, BYD, has ramped up its publicity push, inviting media to visit its headquarters to test out its latest smart driving features. From automated parking,
台车它的位置可能比较狭窄的话，我们用这个功能，不需要停进去以后连续的2、3次的一前一后的这么一个倒车，右轮会慢慢的滑动，可以感觉，对，可以感觉到。
To remote parking,
I basically am able to drive the car out on my phone.
the company says the highly competitive EV market is shifting gears.
电动化应该上半场应该结束了，在中国市场哈，当然在海外还没有啊。那么现在的话呢，在中国市场应该是进行了这种智能化的竞争阶段了。
BYD announced in February that it's going to offer its God's Eye smart driving system in nearly all of its vehicles. Even though other Chinese automakers like XPeng and NIO have also announced smart features, experts note they sold about 100 to 200,000 vehicles last year. A far cry from BYD's over 4 million vehicles sold globally last year. That scale bringing not just cost savings, but other benefits as well.
With all the data from the 4 or 5 million cars that it's going to be collecting, it'll get much better very fast. Whereas some of these other car companies who don't have as many vehicles on the road, it might take a little bit longer. But they're already ahead of BYD currently. Whether they can stay ahead of BYD in the long term, I'm not sure. Countries and regions that likely weren't looking at adopting any type of intelligent driving technology for years, that's been pulled in by at least a decade for places like Southeast Asia, Latin America. Now, are they ready for it? That's a different question.
BYD said while it's working at bringing this technology overseas, it could not commit to a specific timeline, although the technology could be rolled out progressively in different markets instead of all at once.
每个国家的路况不一样。 也要通过这种大量的实际的这种入市，然后呢，不断的进行这种算法的演变，然后当然了，还有和当地这种消费者的一些习惯啊，包括一些像我们的这种自驾、我们的泊车啊，你比如高速公路的一些路况。那么当地这个不同的国家的话呢，也在积极的啊，通过以无人驾驶的这种观点啊，去做好各自的这种法律法规。
Experts add that data privacy is another challenge, while user acceptance is another factor to consider.
就是有顾虑，害怕就是像，比方说堵车呀这些会出现什么问题，要剐蹭这些的啊。
我现在其实对新能源的车还在持怀疑态度，因为有太多就是不是出车祸就会起火、会落锁，这个事情是我比较担。
This also comes as China seeks new markets for its vehicles to boost its economic growth and exports amid ongoing trade tensions and accusations of overcapacity by the likes of the United States and Europe. Olivia Seong, CNA, Shenzhen.
And that's the business update. Otelli.
Thanks so very much for that, Roland. Now, ASEAN chairman and Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim is giving a news conference this hour after meeting with Chinese Premier Li Qiang and counterparts from the Middle East. And you are looking at live pictures from the summit venue in Kuala Lumpur. Let's listen in.
That is why sometimes when people talk of globalization, they refer to only the impact of or an influence of the West. It's not necessarily so. If you understand history, that you realize the 1454 journey of Admiral Cheng He, and then we have Malacca. I think Cheng He's visit to Malacca were about 4 or 5 times, I'm not sure. not certain, but then you can sense that sort of engagement. So I think now we have new leadership in ASEAN and in the Middle East, but more so all in China. They have realized that we should work and strengthen that collaboration, mainly focusing on the economy and to secure peace in the region. Right?
Hi, Dato' Sri. Hi, Dato' Sri.
Yes.
I'm Vignesh from Bernama. So, Dato' Sri, I would like to ask on the Timor-Leste status after a few days of deliberation and various level meetings, because earlier the Prime Minister was giving candies to the media personnel.
And that's ASEAN Chairman and Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim wrapping up the summit. And we'll have more updates later this evening on Asia Tonight at 8 p.m. Singapore, Hong Kong time. We're going to go for a break now, but coming up next on East Asia Tonight, South Korea's presidential candidates are set for their final televised debate this evening. How have their campaigns shaped up so far? And could the latest showdown tip the scales? Well, we'll be speaking with an expert for more insights. And a massive chemical plant explosion rocks China's Shandong province. Hello again. You are watching East Asia Tonight, and here are the headlines we've been following. Japan seeks to ease the impact of U.S. tariffs, offering billions of dollars of financial help for small and medium enterprises as both sides prepare for more trade talks. South Korean presidential candidates gear up for their final TV debate, with political reform high on the agenda. And a three-way summit of leaders from Gulf states, China and ASEAN, signaling a new phase in international cooperation that bolsters economic ties amid deepening U.S. trade tensions. U.S. tariffs, South China Sea disputes, and the Myanmar crisis are some of the key issues looming over the ASEAN summit. Philippine Foreign Affairs Secretary Enrique Manalo sat down with CNA's Melissa Go on the sidelines of the meetings in Kuala Lumpur, and he emphasized the need for ASEAN members to be united in addressing these regional concerns and fostering dialogue among all stakeholders.
Do you welcome Prime Minister Anwar's move in having an informal advisory group to engage with Myanmar? Is it something that Philippines will continue engaging both sides, the NUG and the SAC?
We want to ensure continuity with what Malaysia's efforts are, especially with regard to Myanmar. And I think the main aim would be to get as many of the stakeholders, whether they be the NUG, the SAC, EAOs, and other groups, to get dialogue. And of course, aside from the humanitarian assistance, to try and promote some kind of a ceasefire in order to also to help the dialogue. So I think if that's the aim, we'll be fulfilling the 5-point consensus, and that's our aim, to see how we can get that process not only moving, but to achieve results. And I think the moment Malaysia is working on that, so we will continue that approach.
Now, with so much focus on Myanmar and the geo-economic uncertainties, has the issue of South China Sea and the Code of Conduct been overshadowed?
The South China Sea still remains a basic issue, and in the context, of course, for the Philippines it does, but in ASEAN, of course, the Code of Conduct is still the principal vehicle for addressing the tensions in the South China Sea. And many of the leaders already said yesterday that we should aim for an effective, substantive Code of Conduct with ASEAN and China, and so the commitment is still there. And our hope, at least Philippines, is that we could make very significant progress by next year.
Will Philippines push for the early conclusion of Code of Conduct? Do you think it's achievable?
Well, I always have hope we'll try to achieve it, but of course our view is it has to be effective, it has to be substantive, and there are many other conditions, but I think these can be, they're achievable. The devil is in the details.
What is going to happen after the 90-day pause on Trump's tariff is over? Should ASEAN be worried?
Well, not worried, but we have to be ready to react to whatever the situation is, because I think it's important that, since all of us are affected, it's important that we work together. And I think the economic ministers have already issued our approach. So we're willing to talk, and we'll talk as a group. And because we all have a common, basically we've all been affected in a very similar way. So it's important. This is one issue where ASEAN unity is, of course, needed.
Now, it's the first time that ASEAN is having an inaugural summit with GCC and China. What's your key takeaway from that, Secretary Manalo?
The important thing is ASEAN who is bringing these actors together. And the fact that they have been willing to come is an indication that they see the importance of ASEAN. And that's the way I would view it. And therefore, it's an exercise in many ways of ASEAN centrality, at least the ability of ASEAN to convene meetings and bring in countries and promote dialogue aimed at cooperation. So ASEAN has that attraction. And I hope that we come away from this meeting here in KL with that reaffirmation. And the fact that we have already adopted the vision up to 2045, which is aimed at even strengthening ASEAN even more and enhancing its role in our region, if not the world, then I think that would be my takeaway.
South Korea's presidential race is entering its final stretch. In less than an hour, the leading candidates will face off in their final televised debate, their last chance to sway voters ahead of next week's election. Now, political reform takes center stage in tonight's debate. Since the failed martial law attempt in December, calls for constitutional change and limiting presidential powers have grown louder. Frontrunner Lee Jae-myung wants a two-term, four-year presidency, a major shift from the current five-year single term. A rival Kim Un-soo backs a decentralizing power as well, but proposes a shorter three-year term. Well, Mr. Lee has maintained a steady lead in opinion polls, but the race appears to be tightening. A new Gallup career survey released today shows him holding 49% support, still ahead by double digits, but with Mr. Kim closing in at 35%. Another surveyor, Realmeter, also found the margin narrowing between the two candidates over the past week. For more insights into the upcoming presidential election, we are joined by Young-mi Kim. She is the head of Korean Studies at the University of Edinburgh. Dr. Kim, thanks for joining us this evening. So this is the final face-off before voters head to the polls, with debate viewership actually being halved from 2022. What do you make of that, Dr. Kim? Is it a sign that voters are just being indifferent?
This time, this is obviously about the martial law. A lot of people were really shocked. So the early presidential election is all about it, I should say.
Right. So you were talking about you're looking out. Is it primarily what you're looking out for, what they're going to be talking about, martial law aside? Are you looking for more policy clarity, or do you think there's going to be a bit of the political theater, which we saw in the last debate, where it all got very fiery?
The political debate in general is all about attracting more voters. And sometimes they are talking about very similar things, but in a different way. Lee Jae-myung wants to attract broader voters. So he's putting himself as a center-right and trying to, attract more from the conservative side. And also from the conservative side, they want to copy what Lee Jae-myung used to say. So this is very interesting to see.
Right. And you talked about, how martial law has pretty much, what we've seen in recent times, one of the biggest political shocks in decades for South Korea with the impeachment of a sitting president. So how much of that crisis do you think has reshaped what people are really looking for in their next leader?
The current Yoon Suk-yeol administration was born out of the failure of prosecution reform policies in the previous government, Moon Jae-in administration. In a way, Lee Jae-myung, if he wins this presidential election, I think this gives a really good clue to carry on prosecution reform. But in his agenda, campaign agenda, Lee Jae-myung is more focusing on economic growth and broadening their agenda to attract more worried about conservative voters who are worried about U.S., Japan, stronger alliance. And also sometimes they talk about maybe China should not be that close. But Lee Jae-myung with the Democratic Party, they are likely to be close to China as well.
Right. I want to touch on the latest Gallup poll where, we know that the opposition, Lee Jae-myung, he's been leading, right? I would say that the contest, it appears, seems to be narrowing, but do you think there's actually even a realistic path for Mr. Kim to close that gap before polling comes around on June 3rd?
I was also interested. It was really interesting to see the gap is closer, but it's unlikely the Conservative Party would win. I can't predict, but people shocked over failure of democracy short term and the enormous power abuse of the previous president Yoon Suk-yeol is much higher, I think.
And we've also seen how, both of these major candidates are trying to shake things up with the presidency, either shorter terms or the chance for re-election. Do you think South Koreans, they want that kind of a change?
This change, the request for the changes has been really going on because current presidential system is actually legacy of authoritarian, regime. President can only have 5 years, but general election for the National Assembly is held every 4 years. So whoever becomes president, they will face the intermediate challenges by the general election. So this should be changed. So in a sense, 5 years of presidency is way too short. So some, they want to have an American way, 4 years and could be re-elected, but we will see how it goes. This is a good time to have a political reform.
Yeah, and I suppose, with all the issues and the potential candidates, trying to gain all that votes. On the other hand, we've seen some groups, far-right groups specifically, so they have been ramping up talking about anti-China rhetoric because the candidates, they are split, right, on how they envision handling Beijing, for instance. So how is this sort of rhetoric, how is it shaping voter sentiment, especially among the younger voters or even swing voters?
It's a shame to see far-right voices, they've been airing about anti-China element. But in reality, when it comes to business, China and environment is way too big. So it's unlikely the government or business sector can have anti-Chinese policies. And also at the human, ordinary citizens level, there are a lot of Chinese migrants living in Korea. I think that's why they have a local vote. They can have a local election as well. So that's why they are talking about Chinese voters having too much voice at the local election. But it's a shame, I should say, that kind of far-right voices.
Yeah, good point you made there. From, how they handle North Korea to, what's happening in China. How much do you think foreign policy issues actually matter to the average South Korean voter, especially at a time when the South Korean economy is under great stress?
It's really interesting to see because last time when Lee Jae-myung and Yoon Suk-yeol were competing over presidential election earlier, they did not talk much about foreign policy, but this time they all talk about U.S., Korea, Japan alliance at the same time, what to do with, policies for China and North Korea. Traditionally, Democratic Party, they are always, leaning to have a closer relation with North Korea. and also closer relation to China in terms of business and etc. And voters are divided in a way. Older generation having memory of war would like to have a closer relation with the US. That's why far-right sector, they do have more elderly people's voting. And for younger people, they don't have memory of war much, but they care about the opportunities, fair opportunities for job. And then sometimes they say, why do we need a foreigners taking our opportunity? But that's still, I would say, minority, because a lot of middle-class young people, they don't want to work for, small, medium-sized company or so-called 3D jobs. That's why they invite foreigners to fill up the gap.
Right. Well, many thanks for your analysis. Appreciate your time and thoughts. Dr. Yang Mi Kim, Head of Korean Studies at the University of Edinburgh. Well, we are going for another short break, but coming up on East Asia tonight, China accuses Taiwan of cyber attacks on its computer networks, joining the finger at the island's ruling Democratic Progressive Party, pointing the finger, excuse me. And we also have the latest on a railroad in South America that could be a game changer for trade with China. In Japan, 10 people have been injured in an explosion at a construction site in Tokyo. The blast occurred this morning in a residential district in the capital. More than 30 fire engines were deployed, and the blaze was mostly contained in about 90 minutes. Police say 10 people complained of pain in their ears and throat, but noted that none of the injuries are life-threatening. The victims included workers and residents aged between 20s and 70s. Construction workers were driving piles into the ground for a new condominium building at the time, and police say an underground gas pipe could have been damaged. Over in China, state media CCTV has reported a large explosion at a chemical plant. It did not give casualty figures. Now, rescue operations are underway. The blast happened in the eastern province of Shandong, some 400 kilometers from Beijing, at around noon local time. A video from social media shows grey smoke billowing into the sky as people ran for shelter. Other posts showed shattered windows in nearby villages. Residents reported feeling vibrations from the explosion. The blast occurred at a factory owned by Shandong Gaomi Youdao Chemical, with more than 300 registered employees. It specializes in the development, production, and sale of pesticide and related chemical products. Chinese authorities have accused Taiwan of backing cyber attacks on up to 1,000 sensitive mainland networks, including military, energy, and government systems. Public security authorities in Guangzhou allege that the hacker group is linked to Taiwan's ruling Democratic Progressive Party. Police said that the group launched cyber attacks from overseas IP addresses, deploying phishing emails, conducting password attacks, and using Trojan horse programs. And Taiwan has yet to respond to the allegation. Both Beijing and Taipei have accused each other in the past of using cyber attacks, not only for surveillance purposes, but to apply psychological pressure. Peru says that it will seek a high-level meeting with China and Brazil to advance a major railway project that will help link the two Latin American countries. Well, this comes at a time of rapidly growing ties between China and Latin America and amid global trade tensions. Well, the plan is to connect Brazil's Atlantic coast to a new port on Peru's Pacific coast. This would create easier trade routes between Latin America and China, and will also allow goods to avoid a possible bottleneck at the Panama Canal or having to detour around the southern tip of the continent. Previous estimates have placed construction costs at about $660 billion for the planned expansion. Discussions about the railway have been ongoing for at least a decade, with Chinese President Xi Jinping first signaling interest when he visited the region in 2014. Or just last month, a Chinese delegation visited Brazil to discuss infrastructure projects, including this railroad. If the project goes ahead, Brazil will have a direct shipping route to China that's about a third faster and cheaper as well. Beijing, amid geopolitical tensions with the U.S., has pledged to further boost China's footprint in Latin America. Mr. Xi told South American leaders at a forum 2 weeks ago that Beijing intends to disburse $9 billion in credit to the region and that China will import more from Latin America. A trade between China and the region exceeded $500 billion for the first time last year. That's an increase of more than 40 times since 2001. Well, from grocery stores in Timor-Leste to nickel plants in Indonesia, China's growing economic presence has been a source of both celebration and concern in Southeast Asia. Some communities fear that they are being crowded out, saying it's difficult to compete. Well, CNA finds out more in the second part of a series on China's regional influence.
This landfill in Timor-Leste's Tiba Bay is built and run by China Harbor Engineering Company. It is just one of the many projects in the country involving a Chinese firm. Since Timor-Leste's independence in 2002, China has helped build infrastructure such as the Presidential Palace and the National Power Grid. Timorese Dion Gonzalez, who works for China Harbor Engineering, believes such Chinese projects can benefit his nation.
Because this country is a young country, I think we need a lot of the investment or company come to invest in our country, Timor-Leste.
Today, Chinese businesses are everywhere in Timor-Leste and thriving in sectors previously dominated by locals. Prime Minister Sanana Gusmao told CNA that local businesses need to buck up amid the rise of Chinese merchants in the country.
It is a problem. A problem is we have to push, improve the culture of business. I don't say that we are dependent on China. It will depend on now we are dependent on the import from ASEAN countries.
Neighboring Indonesia is also no stranger to Chinese-backed projects. It is home to the Indonesia Morowali Industrial Park, which produces nickel, a crucial component in many products, such as batteries for electric vehicles. It was launched in 2015, and it has about 94,000 workers, about 8,500 Chinese staff. The government says the industrial park has helped develop Morowali, which lacked basic infrastructure such as electricity a decade ago. But since its establishment, fishermen living nearby have complained about the dirty water and problems getting a catch. Some residents have also spoken out about the poor air quality. Yet, workers see the positive sides along with the negative.
Di tempat saya, atasan saya masih cukup membuka diri untuk menerima saran, masukan, dan lain sebagainya. Sehingga dalam hal ini saya bekerja masih ada kenyamanan tersendiri di tempat saya bekerja. Di satu sisi dukanya itu masih banyak persoalan-persoalan yang sering saya hadapi di tempat kerja, seperti persoalan debu, pembagian APD, terus masalah rawan akan kecelakaan kerja, bekerja di ketinggian, dan masalah-masalah lain yang cukup banyak lah, cukup kompleks lah di dalam kawasan hari ini.
Chinese-backed infrastructure in the region will likely grow, and it's up to countries to negotiate with China for any new projects after weighing the economic and social cost and benefits. Kiki Seregar, CNA, Dili, Timor-Leste.
And that does it for East Asia tonight. Don't forget your headlines anytime at cna.asia. And you can also find us on Facebook and YouTube. Thanks for watching.